Episode 8, Look Before You Sleep. This episode is the first to show how contrasting personalities can create difficulties within a friend group, and focuses mainly on Rarity and Applejack. I'm Count Lurchalot, and this is Lukewarm Television. The episode begins with the residents of Ponyville preparing for a thunderstorm that is due to hit the town. Immediately we see how the difference in personalities can cause arguments with how different characters approach the situation. Applejack is tearing down branches to help cause less damage to the town. Meanwhile, all Rarity wants to do is make the town prettier. I'm immediately on Applejack's side for this argument because while I can see this as part of Rarity's generous personality, given the situation, her actions aren't really benefiting the town, while Applejack's are. The rain begins, and while Applejack wants to finish up her task, Rarity wants to get out of the rain before it ruins her mane. Applejack advises she take shelter under a bench, but then Rarity refuses as it's muddy underneath. This angers Applejack and quickly leads to an argument between the two. Eventually, they decide to go their separate ways, but when the storm gets stronger, they decide to stick together and find shelter. Thankfully, Twilight lives close by and offers them shelter. Unfortunately, the arguing between Applejack and Rarity continues after Rarity snobbishly tells Applejack to clean her hooves. As the storm makes it difficult for Rarity and Applejack to head home, Twilight offers for them to stay the night, as she's home by herself as Spike is currently away on royal business. Twilight then suggests they have a slumber party, as this is something she's never had before. Not wanting to spend the night in the same house as Applejack, Rarity tries to make up an excuse to leave, but after seeing how enthusiastic Twilight is, she agrees to stay the night. Applejack comes back in after cleaning mud off her hooves, but walks in to see Rarity and Twilight in mud masks. This annoys Applejack for obvious reasons, and Rarity explains how this is different. I'm not going to explain how this is different, because I think we've all seen this in other shows. Twilight explains that they're having makeovers because it's part of a slumber party. Applejack likewise doesn't want to have a slumber party with Rarity and makes an excuse to leave. But with the storm out of control, she decides to stay. Then, without asking, Rarity gives Applejack a mud mask along with the cucumbers, and Applejack does what I'd probably do. She eats the cucumbers. Twilight continues to show her excitement for the slumber party, so Applejack and Rarity agree to get along for the night, even though they clearly don't want to be in each other's company, especially considering they keep doing things to annoy each other. After finishing makeovers, they move on to ghost stories, which Applejack is eager about. Applejack wants to tell a story about a prissy ghost who annoys everyone, which is clearly a jab at how much Rarity annoys her. Rarity follows this up by wanting to tell a story about a messy, inconsiderate ghost, which is clearly a jab at Applejack. The power goes out, and then Twilight decides to tell her own story about the Headless Horse, which I'm guessing is a reference to the Headless Horseman of Sleepy Hollow. This is a pretty entertaining scene, especially with how horrified Rarity and Applejack look. Twilight scares them so much that she actually has them hugging and screaming, after which she reveals she was trolling them when she turns the lights back on. After this, they decide to make s'mores, and we once again see the vast difference in personalities, as Applejack just wants to roast marshmallows, while Rarity decides to make the s'mores as precise as possible. Applejack then decides to antagonize Rarity further by eating the s'more with her mouth open and then burping. Then it's time for Truth or Dare, and if we've seen any slumber party movie or TV episode ever, we know that's bound to end in disaster. Rarity and Applejack take this chance to take more jabs at each other for how they find the other pony annoying. And this was probably intentional, but considering they forget to ask Truth or Dare before making a Truth or a Dare, I'm guessing they don't exactly know the rules. Twilight explains the rules, and Rarity is forced to go outside in the rain and ruin her mane. Again though, Rarity didn't choose Dare as the option, so they're not playing the game right. I'm sorry, I'm a stickler for the rules. Rarity complies and ends up traumatized. Rarity then dares Applejack to play dress up in a frou-frou, glittery, lacy outfit. But again, Applejack didn't choose Dare, she should have the option of Truth or Dare. At any rate, Applejack complies, and I'll admit, the end result is pretty funny. Twilight queries if she'll ever get a turn, but they ignore her and start daring each other to do things they'd never want to do normally. Seeing that Truth or Dare isn't working, Twilight thinks they should move on to the next activity, which is pillow fights. Rarity doesn't want to partake in this, but of course Applejack does, and after striking first, all hell breaks loose and a war begins, with Twilight ending up a casualty of war. The war continues with poor Twilight caught in the crossfire. It's at this point Twilight feels they should just call it a night. Unfortunately, the drama doesn't stop there, as Rarity and Applejack are forced to share a bed and start fighting over the blanket like children. Rarity then forces Applejack out of bed so she can make it, then shows Applejack the proper way to get in bed, and Applejack retaliates by jumping on the bed to get Rarity out. They start playing tug of war with the blanket until Twilight loses her temper. She scolds them for their behavior, especially because it has prevented her from checking off the main requirement of a slumber party, which is to have fun. Despite this, Rarity and Applejack continue to argue, angering Twilight further to the point where she asks if anything else could go wrong, which as we all know is the worst thing to say in this situation. Lightning hits a nearby tree, causing it to create a falling hazard. Applejack explains that this is what she was trying to do earlier, so something like this wouldn't happen. While Rarity does briefly feel guilty, she then tries to stop Applejack from pulling the tree down, which, to Rarity's credit, was the right choice, as Applejack causes the tree to crash into the library. Applejack apologizes, but Twilight is understandably angry, as there is now a tree branch in the middle of her bedroom. Applejack does her best to remove the tree, but Rarity is more concerned with cleaning up the books, while Twilight is trying to see how this relates to slumber parties. I wonder if this is an example of Twilight being autistic, because she seems to be ignoring the obvious problem in the room. Applejack then apologizes to Rarity and admits that she should have listened to Rarity and that her attention to detail could have actually helped them avoid this whole mess. Rarity is still hesitant to help as it will make her messy, but Applejack begs as she knows she can't fix this problem on her own. Rarity finally agrees to help. Meanwhile, Twilight is still obsessing over the wrong thing. Again, I could be wrong, but I feel this might be a clue to Twilight being autistic. Rarity manages to fix the problem by using her magic to turn the branch into a heap of tree sculptures. Applejack then agrees to follow Rarity's advice when disposing of the stump. With the issue resolved, Rarity realizes she's covered in mud, but Applejack helps her by giving her a quick spa treatment, and the two make up. Twilight is still oblivious to what's going on, which I think strengthens the point I was making earlier. With everyone happy again, they manage to have a proper slumber party with lots of smiles and laughter. They're playing 20 questions, and this gives me one more example of Twilight's possible autism, because they ask if they are getting warmer, to which Twilight asks if she needs to turn the heat up. I've had a lot of moments like this where I misinterpret the words of others, so I feel this is a pretty good example. Twilight is also overjoyed they are finally getting along, at which point Applejack and Rarity apologize to each other for their past actions, which of course leads to another argument over who is sorrier. But thankfully, it ends with them laughing and Twilight is able to declare her first slumber party a success. Twilight once again finishes this off with a letter to the princess, where she expresses how, although it might be hard to believe that two people who seem to have nothing in common can get along, but when you are able to embrace each other's differences, you might just discover a way to be friends after all. Like I said, I feel this episode focuses on the most recurring and important theme of this show, that being the friendship between a group of characters that have such different personalities from each other, but still manage to get along, because it's their differences that actually make them so strong. As I've stated before, this is something I'm able to relate to because many of my closest friends have personalities vastly different from my own. Also, I emphasize the importance of this message as it's not the last time it's brought up, and a long way down the line we will get another episode that focuses on how Rarity's personality is very different from another main character, but that's a long way away. Until next time, thanks for watching, please like and subscribe, and I'll see you at the next review.